Whitney Dahlberg is an EMDR certified licensed art therapist. Maybe she can tell us what that means a little bit. And a board certified registered art therapist at Trauma Specialists of Maryland. In this role, she serves individuals and families, clients experiencing trauma, grief, substance use disorders, depression, anxiety, and various medical diagnoses. She's been working in a supervisory role to art therapy graduate students as well. During her internship with trauma specialists in 2020, Whitney began working with Living Through Loss, a nonprofit community of parents who've lost children to overdose. She continues to work with this group using art as a pathway to navigate grief. Prior to becoming an art therapist, Whitney was the owner and founder of The Muse here in Frederick, and a co-founder of a community art project with Courtney Prowl. I hope I'm saying that right. Courtney Prowl. Called Lend a Hand, which works and supports local nonprofits. The Quilt of Continuing Bonds is the latest work of Lend a Hand through the facilitation of Whitney, co-founder Courtney Prowl, and Chrissy Benson. As an artist, Whitney's work is personal and narrative, but applies to universal themes such as mental health issues, feminine roles, political matters, and life experiences. Her pieces have been displayed locally, regionally, and as a part of the International Fantastic Fibers exhibit. Would you welcome Whitney Dahlberg?
Hey, wow, thank you everyone for coming, and this is a nice crowd, and I appreciate everyone for coming out. So if you want to know what EMDR is, that is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So that is something that is used to treat trauma. It's evidence-based, and I have gone through the process to be certified in that. And then LCPAT is just the licensed clinical professional art therapist and board certified art therapist. So I'm talking tonight because of the quilt that's outside. I don't know if people haven't checked it out. Please do if you haven't. We're going to be talking about that. I'm going to be talking about, in general, using textiles in art therapy, specifically with two of the projects. So the first being my research project that I did as a graduate student, and then also the quilt. And they are all using textiles and the significance in art therapy. The first thing that I think is really important to mention whenever we talk about art therapy is the difference between therapeutic art and art therapy. This is very important to talk about because all art is therapeutic pretty much. As you know, anyone who's done art knows the therapeutic nature in art. However, unless it's being done with an art therapist, it cannot be called art therapy. So in the state of Maryland, which is not the case in all states, but in the state of Maryland, art therapy is a licensed protected profession. And one of the reasons is because if you were to give someone, for example, we'll be talking about this, a personal object, so an object that means it's a textile that maybe was from a loved one, or if somebody is just given watercolors, this can produce a flooding effect. So an art therapist is trained in this to know what types of things and how to handle a situation such as that. So one of my favorite artists, Louise Bourgeois, a lot of people know her for her spiders, but I love her for her textile work, and she has a lot of amazing quotes, one of which is, "The act of sewing is a process of emotional repair." And so just keeping this quote in mind as we go through the slides, I think it'll be pretty evident how this quote really comes true in the work that I've done and I've seen among my clients. So you heard all the fancy background. The background of me with textiles is actually that, my mom and my family members, they were not sewers, but for some reason I was really drawn to textile work, and it has been my way of working through grief at all times. Several years ago, my grandmother, Dorothy, passed away, and my mom gave me her gloves, and I don't know why, but I wanted to stitch on them, and I stitched all the things that reminded me of her. So I put my hand into her glove, which is how I had to stabilize it when I was working on these gloves, and it was giving me all sorts of emotions. There's such intimacy when you are putting your hand into something that someone else's hand has been in. So I felt close to her as I held her gloves in my hand and reflected upon my memories through the slow process of stitching. So for example, like we always had Christmas Eve parties. Like every single year she had a Christmas Eve party. So thinking about that as I stitched, I was able to kind of process that and think through all of those memories. So she always drank coffee. She's the one who got me drinking coffee as a very young child, Black. And just some of the other things, they called her Giggles. I called her Nana Dot. She liked Frisia. So she always drank a whiskey sour. Even at the funeral, we all had whiskey sour. So being able to kind of make this piece allowed for something that we're going to talk about later, which is continued bonds. So these are the bonds that I keep and I continue. When I have coffee, when I look at these gloves, those are memories that I have with her. So these are two other pieces just for an example. So these are not using necessarily personal objects. However, just to show how line and color can really kind of create that and evoke the emotions that are being felt, like in art therapy. So the words in the background were from my journal. So there's so many different ways to kind of convey your personal narratives. So this first project that we're going to be talking about is Amulets of Love, which was my research project. I might say Badges of Love, I might say Amulets of Love. I've used both terms throughout. But personal objects in an art therapy intervention for the bereavement of disenfranchised grief. So I'm wearing mine, and I've noticed a few others in the room, but that's my badge of love. So we will be talking about that first and then about the quilt. So the population is the Living Through Loss group. So before doing this actual research, I was working for 2 years conducting workshops with this group. And then I noticed by doing some of these workshops, and we did the Badges of Love, I just noticed a lot of really interesting and inspiring information and seeing people really connect to their pieces and hearing the storytelling, and I really wanted to go ahead and dig in a little bit deeper and do research. I do want to mention this caveat in that all of the people that I've worked with through Living Through Loss and through my clients at Trauma Specialists are very human and personal to me, and I have a lot of compassion. When I'm talking about it as far as a research, it is going to sound more clinical, but I just want to put that out there to make sure that I'm being aware of the sensitivity of the people that I work with. Okay, so we're going to talk about stigma, storytelling, and art therapy. I think using textiles and narratives and personal objects is huge in being able to convey a lot of storytelling and reducing stigma. So in drug-related deaths, there's a lot of stigma, and it can add complexity to someone's ability to cope with their loss. So a lot of times people might feel that their grief is devalued, and it's met with less compassionate responses. Sharing stories is an important form of meaning-making. Potential stigma received or perceived from the public can prevent the bereaved from sharing their stories. So providing art therapy techniques that facilitate meaning-making and narrative legacy building can offer therapeutic benefit for grief. So this provides a space for someone to tell their story without being met with some of the stigma that might otherwise be in talking. So next we have stitching as an intervention for grief work. So stitching cultivates deep regulation, stress reduction, and mindfulness. The stitch process itself is an embodied experience engaging the arms, hands, eyes, and mind, and this produces memory making. And embroidery helps establish self-connection and has a potential for deep embodied healing of personal wounds. So going back to EMDR, that is a bilateral process, and there's something about the bilateral process while talking that actually helps to create a sense of calm and also reprocess some of those memories. So if we think about it with the stitching, and as you can see in this picture, there are two hands that are involved here. And those are vintage linens, so that can be a personal object. And when we're stitching, I like to kind of prompt people with the whole regulation and stress. I am mirroring when I'm breathing in, I pull it up, and I'm breathing out as I pull it through. So it's a meditative process of stitching. You're breathing in and you're breathing out. So this piece, for example, if you were to say, I'm having a hard day at work, you're hearing, I'm having a hard day at work. If you see this, knowing I'm having a hard day at work, you're seeing what? You're seeing messiness, you're seeing heaviness, you're seeing maybe some pain, a lot of different things. So when you're creating art, it's a way of telling a story that means more than words. Words are, more kind of surface level, and as you're creating art, you can hear all the different dimensions of that same statement. So both hands are engaged while experiencing the sensory properties of the texture of the cloth combined with the vibration of the thread pulling the fabric to facilitate relaxation through the autonomic nervous system. So as anyone who has ever stitched knows, there is that feeling. There's just something about stitching and kind of hitting the fabric and pulling it through. Obviously, when you're learning how to stitch, there's maybe not that. There might be a little bit of stress, a little bit of anxiety. And last week I was in Portland and I was presenting my research at the American Art Therapy Conference. And I had a young man who was struggling with stitching, never stitched before. And at the end, he came up to me and he said, I just want you to know I have fallen in love with stitching. And so it made me feel really good because it is a little bit challenging in the beginning, but pushing through, you can achieve that ability to kind of sync up that breath, get into a rhythm, and pull your nervous system through. And so by using a form of nonverbal communication, powerful feelings of anger and other emotions that are not deemed socially acceptable in the expression of grief can be conveyed. So maybe I present this piece and I'm able to say things that maybe I couldn't say. I'm not really happy in my job. This is not from my current job, just so you know. It was during Christmas season in retail, so there you go. This is what Christmas season in retail looks like. So I couldn't say to my customers, this is a really rough season. I can do this though, and I don't need to say anything. And I feel really good. It feels like I'm able to convey that message. So in grief work, the slow, repetitive process of stitching offers time and space to reflect on the loss while engaging in a purposeful project. This time allows for a period of mourning and possible acceptance of separation and loss. So again, that goes back to those gloves and of the work that I'm going to be talking about. It's not like a quick sketch, it's not like a quick painting. Some of these things take months and months. So you are sitting with those feelings, you're sitting with those memories, and you're thinking about, and you're mourning, and you're possibly accepting some of that separation and loss. So I'm not going to get into all of the weeds. I did take out many slides that would completely probably bore most people. But just to give you an idea, in the research, there were women who lost a child between 1 and 5 years at the start of the study. And the reason this time period was chosen is because within the first year, so many people talk about kind of being in a cloud or in a daze and just being so overcome with grief that they're not necessarily able to process or do some of the actual kind of grief work. And it's important to note this because of a later slide talking about some a new DSM disorder that has been criteria, and it has to do with that. So this is the actual flyer that was put out, and it was a 4-hour session. So participants engaged in this intervention. It was called Amulets of Love or Badges of Love. So this was to create a badge honoring your loved one using meaning making to promote post-traumatic growth. So we'll talk about this as well, but meaning making can promote post-traumatic growth. So we're facilitating continued bonds through engaging with the loved one and wearing the badge over your heart. So I am wearing one of my badges over my heart. This is a C for a friend of mine. And this is a piece of jewelry that we made in a class, and she passed away, and she's over my heart. So there's continued bonds. And this is the part that might get a little bit too much in the weeds. But just so you know, I did my due diligence. There's an inventory of complicated grief, which provides a general measure of grief. There's a grief and meaning reconstruction inventory, which measures the therapeutic benefits, which was done after the actual process. And then there were themes that were looked for in the conversation. And then also the formal elements for art therapy, which is an actual assessment was done and an assessment of the personal items that were brought. So here we get to a few examples. So the Sandman comic character was a t-shirt and the charm with the child's name and birth date engraved on it. So this prompted storytelling, right? So we want to hear about this comic character. We want to hear all about it. We want to know the story. And so the participant was able to tell us the story. So make these continued bonds, tell about their person. So it is actually, it's like that saying their name. And here we have another one. And so this was a tie and a heart charm that was included. And this was holding his ashes. And the colors also were chosen very specifically. And the stitches, the X's and the O's. So all of these had a personal meaning that were able to be conveyed without saying a word. And then in this example, this participant had mentioned that they had been saving the christening cap and they really wanted to include it in some way or form. And so she placed this one. She decided not to put it over her heart. She has it in a shadow box. And she cut out the words love that were on the pair of shorts and the butterfly, which is also a very common symbol in grief. So again, I'm not going to get into all of this, but in the themes, I found 8 different themes and I identified them and coded them. But then it seemed like there was a lot of overlap. So I chose to redo the codes and have it so that there were only 6. And the decision to combine them is supported by existing grief research. Continued bonds, meaning making, and legacy are often interchangeable, and they all actually are a resource for growth under Niemeyer's meaning construction theory. And I knew someone was going to ask me what this theory was, and since I did this a long time ago, I made sure to include that it emphasizes the importance of finding meaning in the aftermath of loss, which can help navigate grief and rebuild lives. So as you can see, meaning reconstruction is by far way ahead of the other one, and it's community and interconnectedness, feelings of peace and relaxation, intensified feelings of grief, and we will be talking about that. And then there was some talk about drug use and some personal grief experiences. Let me just make sure I did. I think I tapped it. Okay, no, I didn't. Okay. So just to say, all of that, I took out a whole bunch of information, but really what's important to know is that there was a strong presence of factors of meaning reconstruction, which would indicate the intervention helps to promote post-traumatic growth. And then also, individuals who achieve a higher sense of meaning reconstruction may experience lower grief symptoms, which supports the need for meaning reconstruction interventions with this population to promote post-traumatic growth and prevent prolonged grief. So the role of the textile was demonstrated to promote feelings of relaxation and provide a sense of distraction. I do remember one participant specifically saying, we should get together every week and mend things. So, that was a really, a testament to the feelings of doing that kind of stitching. So talking specifically about personal textiles, so I really want to emphasize that you need to be mindful when using personal textiles. There was intensified feelings of grief. So using these objects promoted memories of loved ones, so that was obviously very positive. It also was really helpful to kind of confront avoidance by being able to use these textiles. But all participants in the study verbalized and exhibited behaviors on some level regarding either the gathering and or cutting of their child's clothing. I had one participant say that they almost didn't come today, the day of the event, because they had a hard time. There were things in boxes that hadn't been touched. There were things in rooms that hadn't been touched. So this was a highly sensitive and hard thing for people to do. And even in the workshop that I conducted last week, there were no personal textiles, and there were tears, and there was a lot of conversation, because stitching and really focusing on those memories brings up a lot of emotions. So if you add in a personal textile, you can see how that could intensify feelings of grief. So this quote, and I will try not to cry because it is a very powerful quote, but what I witnessed, and I'm blessed I could witness this with you all, is that feeling of cutting in. We all kind of stopped. We just wouldn't cut. But I was thinking once we cut, we got a little strength from that. As painful as it was, we gained a little bit of strength to move forward in this journey. Even though we're just sewing it on here, that cutting was a symbol. I'm getting better. And so, right before I was about to present my research, the DSM decided to include a recent introduction of prolonged grief disorder. And I understand there's a lot of differing feelings on this. Having something actually qualifying as a disorder can bring about, insurance coverage for any kind of treatment. It can have some kinds of implications. However, based on this pilot study, individuals who suffer with disenfranchised grief and complicated grief would likely fall into the criteria for a PGD under the DSM. And this implies a pathological manifestation of what many people consider an appropriate reaction to the sudden loss of a child. So future research should examine the effects of labelizing these already stigmatized parents. As I stated earlier in this, the first year is often met with a lot of cloudiness, not able to actually really process some of these things. And as we know, grief is not linear, and so there is going to be appropriate reactions to the sudden loss of a child that will qualify them under this DSM category. So all participants in this study verbalized and exhibited behaviors regarding gathering and cutting into their child's clothing. And so this would actually, I think, imply that bereaved parents engaging in art therapy with the personal clothing items would seemingly assist in the prevention of PGD through exposure to the loss. So I feel that more research could be done to see if using personal objects would actually help to prevent some of this because of the lack of avoidance, because they're actually kind of coming into contact with some of this. So art therapy is not just for the clients or the participants, it can also be really helpful for the therapist. So after doing this research, this is my own personal response art, witnessing the support among the women, their openness and empathy towards new mothers who joined the group, and their welcoming attitude towards me in their own intense loss was inspiring. So some of these symbols for me were the bird, the feathers, the circle, the threads, and the open hand. And I feel like this represents kind of holding space for these women. And then also the bird and the feather, while it's always meant a lot to me as a message, for this group, there's so many messages, and feathers and butterflies, things like that, are all meanings. And kind of just showing that thread, that messiness, and the circle, everybody is kind of holding each other in it. And so now I'm on to the next project, which hopefully you have seen out in the hallway. This is the Continuing Bonds quilt. So continued bonds, as we spoke about earlier, refers to the emotional attachment that the bereaved individual maintains with their loved one after death, either through reconstruction or integration of memory and symbolic representation. So this is a picture of the quilt, but it is out there. You can take a look at it. So rather than viewing grief as a process of letting go, continued bonds emphasize that grief is about finding ways to continue the connection with your loved one, allowing for a healthy attachment even in death. So this is the quilt making process. What we did, and it's myself, Courtney, and Chrissy, Courtney Prawl and Chrissy Benson, they kind of helped facilitate. We all came up with the idea. We wanted to do something. So we are a part of the Lend a Hand group that was mentioned in the bio. And so first there was a stamp creation. So the stamp was created to represent the continued bond. So people chose different things that were personal to them, representing their continued bond. And then adding paint, and then adding some stitching. So I also put these pictures here because it really shows like some of those themes that we talked about, which are very important in post-traumatic growth, which is storytelling and continued bonds, So creating these stamps and these blocks, we were all talking and telling stories. Why did you choose the sun or the moon? Why did you choose these colors? So people were just telling stories, and that was beautiful to hear. And then their community and interconnectedness. So that's Chrissy sitting there with a participant, and they're talking about creating that block, and then legacy, construction, and meaning making. So there's again that butterfly, which is very special to that person. And when you go out and look at the quilt, there is a brochure, and each block is connected to a story, and it tells why the particular stamp was created for that block. So that's really interesting. I recommend people check that out. So this was seeing the quilt for the first time. So as you can see, there's so much like conversation, there's sharing. Each person was telling the story of each other's block and talking about it. And this was really meaningful for myself and Chrissy and Courtney to see just the final effect of it. And so post-traumatic growth happens when through deliberate reflection and meaning making. This can also mean advocacy and opportunities for positive change, even during painful experiences. So I mentioned this because the quilt is something that I feel like is really helpful because it is doing all of those things. It's doing the storytelling. People are able to reflect. There's meaning making. And also there's advocacy. So, a lot of times people don't understand that this can affect everyone. And every person behind that block is a person. And it's really important for everyone to hear their stories. And so this allowed for the storytelling process to occur. So now I have a few people that would like to kind of share, and they are welcome to change their minds if they don't want to, but anyone who's here that maybe wants to talk about their participation with either the quilt block or the badge, I would invite you to come up, and you don't have to come up, but anyone who would like to say a few words about kind of anything regarding the process, I think would be welcome to share.
So thank you all for coming because for those of us who have lost kids to addiction, we have a different type of trauma because it's not always accepted. We kind of have to grieve behind closed doors because some people can be very hurtful and be like, well, your child did that because they drank alcohol or they took drugs. So we have a different grieving process. And it's hard if your child dies from a cancer or car accident. It seems like there's more sympathy. At least that's what I find in my thing. So to be in this group is just amazing because we're all struggling in a different way. And when I started, and Whitney was, I'm kind of new. I lost my son 2 years ago, and when I started, I was really apprehensive because I don't like to share my art supplies. What are we doing? Why do we have to pass all this stuff around? And, but what I learned was, real critical about my work, but it wasn't really for me about the work. It was about meeting the other ladies and watching what they were doing and seeing, wow, that means a lot to me. And when I looked at my little patch, I was like, oh, that looks like a 5-year-old did this. But it wasn't that. It was the telling the story. And my son and I, we had a thing, even when he was young, he liked to tell me his deepest secrets at night at the playground on a swing. And so we did that from middle school all the way up until he went into the Marines, and it was always in the evenings. And we went to a playground, and a police officer actually pulled up and asked us, what's going on here? And then he realized, I said, oh, it's a mother-son talk. And he's like, wow, more people should do that. And when Tommy went off into the military, I had moved and I made sure I put an industrial swing set or swings in that backyard, and it's still there today. When he came home, we would go out there at night and we would swing on it. And so doing that and telling that story just helped me bring it to life and let everyone know a little bit more about my son, because he was more than his addiction. He was more than anything that any stranger wouldn't know. He just, every person brings that to life. And to have Whitney come and everybody from, living through loss has just been amazing. And it's a journey that we don't want anyone else to have to go through, but we know, unfortunately, there's going to be more numbers all the time. And just to get over your artistic or non-artistic talents and come and just hang out with other people that are grieving, it's just been an amazing experience. So I can't thank you enough. So.
Hi, I also want to thank everybody for coming this evening. I want to thank everybody for coming this evening. I'm going to try to project. So I made an amulet, and I'm not, I don't consider myself to be artistic. I consider myself to be non-artistic, whatever, okay. And so, but what I did when Whitney gave us directions as to what we're supposed to do, I brought this little charm that has my daughter Ginny's name on it and her birth date. And she was into Neil Gaiman. He was an author. He did books and comics and all kinds of things. And this is one of the characters that she had on a T-shirt. And the character is Death, because Death was beautiful. And so, that was one of her characters that she liked. And she liked a lot of the other ones, but she didn't have any T-shirts with the other ones on it. So this is the one I chose. And I used stitching, and I used pink because that was her favorite color. And I did this, and Whitney was kind enough to give me this pin to use, but the pin is really, really big and thick and fat, and it makes holes in your clothes. So I put this chain on instead. And I do wear this every now and then because, again, it's touching to me. And I have a connection with my daughter through this, and the connection is still there. And my daughter had many challenges throughout her life, medical challenges, and which then became mental challenges. It's really hard when everybody else your age is doing things and you can't, and you're at home because of medical things. So we used to tease her that she, if we could pick her up and shake her, we'd know all the pills inside of her, the medical ones, and that pills helping her with anxiety and depression. She had it all. And she did overdose, and she was not her disease. She was a person who was fighting the best way that she could to feel better, to not hurt so much, to not be in so much pain. And so that's how I remember her. And I don't know about anybody else who's lost someone, whether it be a child or a sibling or a parent or a grandparent. But to me, the grieving process is never over. It's never complete. It softens. It hits every now and then just as hard, but it's not as long. And so for me, to keep having a connection with her is really important for my growth and my moving forward. And I'm not embarrassed to say that I talk to her, because it's important to me to do that. And I tell her things that are worrying me, and I tell her things that I saw in the store that I think she would have liked, that kind of thing. So to have these, I'll call them artifacts, to have these artifacts that we've had a hand in developing, that's part of it's part of my being able to move forward and keeping that connection. So, it was a fine piece of art. That's all I can say.
Hi, everybody. I'm Debbie. Thank you for coming out. Thank you, Whitney. This group of Living Through Loss has shown me through grief that I can grow. And she spoke about it. My badge of love was the one with the tie on it. My son loved ties. I mean, I don't know, he must have had 150 of them. And so when she was talking about it and I saw it, I remember going down, because I have them in like these shoe boxes all lined up, and I remember going down to the basement, because all this stuff's at my house now, and opening that box, and what I felt, like there was so much anxiety that just like came out of that box. And then, you know, she was talking about cutting, and like I said, I had a lot of ties, but that cutting into the tie, it was hard. It was hard because it just brought, you know, floods of emotion up. And what I've done, I have a pillow, and it's got his ties like upside down and backwards, all his really funky ones. And on the back of it, it says, "Mom, I'm okay," because that's what he used to tell me, he's okay. But as a mom, you know when they say that, they're not okay, right? So he struggled with mental health, and he was brilliant. A couple people called him the brilliant mind, or the beautiful mind. And like, if you saw Oppenheimer, when he was in his dorm in the very beginning of the movie, like with all the numbers and everything, that's what my son was going through. And he overdosed. And I mean, the shock, of course, and that fog of cloud in that first year, like I don't even remember what was going on. And for me, I have my own business, so I dove into my business. I could do it, but I don't remember what I did, and I'm in accounting, so prove challenging the next year. But then, as I've done several art projects with her, and the stitching one, we had the handkerchiefs, and we had to do it on Zoom, because it was COVID time, and we had to like write out a statement. She gave us several statements in these beautiful little linens, and I chose perfectly imperfect. And I'm stitching away, and then it was like, wait a minute, it's upside down. So of course I took it out and redid it on the right side. But it was therapeutic, and you know, like I am perfectly imperfect, and the stigma that goes with addiction, I really have a hard time with, because I'm in recovery myself, and you know, these are great people. These were great kids, and we found through our mothers group, because like I'd have a brunch, and it was like we felt the kids were all up, hanging up together as the moms were hanging together. I got goosebumps from saying that. But all of this living through loss process, I had no idea that, I had PTSD. I did seek therapy right away, which I thought, okay, that's what you're supposed to do. And I've seen a lot of people in grief that don't get the help, and I didn't want to be in that black hole. And living through loss is what keeps me walking and trying to help other moms, because unfortunately there's more that come in. So thank you. I love you.
I just want to give time if there's anyone else that wants to speak, and if not, I welcome anyone with any kind of questions. If anyone has questions about living through loss or about the research that was presented, ask away. Yes.
Have you done any research with machine sewing?
I haven't done any research with machine sewing.
Okay.
No, I would think that it would have different properties. You are kind of missing that the tactile part on it, and with me, there'd be more increased frustration. Personally, but that would be really interesting, and I think actually it might also provide distance. So in art therapy, we talk a lot about distancing, and so if you are doing artwork where you have a pen or a brush, you're keeping some distance. So if you have someone use their hands, maybe pastels or finger painting, there's no distance. You're fully immersed in that, and that can be a lot more provoking with emotions. So I would think that the sewing machine would create a bit of distance, personally, but I don't know that. That's just what I believe based on other research. Yeah.
Has anyone done any work with parents who've lost infants in a similar mode?
They may have. I haven't come across anything in that, to be honest. It was a lot harder for me to find literature. Like when I did the literature review, a lot of people in my cohort, they were able to find a lot of information. I had a harder time. There's just not a lot of information out there with textiles. I think that's changing. I think it's changing quite a bit. But I had to actually use a lot of alternative information. Like some of the actual references that I used were like from art books. Some of them were scholarly journals. Some of them were more arts-based books. So I don't know. There might be something that I'm not aware of. But when I was doing it, I definitely had a lot harder time. But I think that would be really helpful. I know there is a woman who makes dolls, and she works with parents who lost infants, and they create a doll. So that would be something interesting to look into.
Is that why you chose the framework that you did? Because there wasn't a lot of research that was focused on specifically what you were doing?
No. I think that's a good idea, but I'm never someone who works in that way. I always kind of go with what I'm passionate about. Right now I have an intern, and she's talking about doing a group, and she's kind of thinking about like, what do we need, and what's missing? And I'm like, well, what do you feel passionate about? And I appreciate her perspective. That's great, and there needs to be people out there that do that. That's just not something if I'm not really interested or passionate about it, I'm not gonna do it. So I am passionate about stitching because that's like my method, and also, yeah, I think that is why I'm speaking more. Like I had no desire to present at the art therapy conference, but someone had wrote a question in our forum and asked about like stitching, and I was like, here's all my information, you should do this would be great, here's my flyers, here's my stitching guides. Like I gave them everything because I really want other people to use it. And someone said, hey, have you ever thought about presenting? And so that's kind of why I presented. So the reason I presented is to get the information out, but that's not why I did the research. Anyone else have any questions?
I just think we should do a finger painting. Just throwing that out.
You want to do finger painting? All right, maybe the Christmas thing. Sounds like that's on the agenda. Yes.
So does the women's group, the living, or I guess it could be parents.
It's men
or
too.
men.
Yep.
Do they get together? Do they just join for a short amount of time, or is it a group that has people that are there for many years, or how does the Living Through Loss group work?
So I will speak to my knowledge, and if Jamie wants to add any information, but there is an initial group. So after the initial loss, there's a more intensified group, and then there's other things. So we also do like the podcast. Anderson Cooper has a really great podcast. So the Living Through Loss group always does. People listen to it, and then they come back and talk about it, and talk about different themes that they've learned in it. There's also another group, so it's I forget what it's called, Growing Through Grief. It's called Growing Through Grief. So after somebody has gone through the initial one, they can continue on to learn more about that actual like growth and the post-traumatic growth. And then I did a 6-week, 7-week one about Inside Out, kind of doing it, like adding some parts work with a lot of coping skills and artwork. So there's different groups. Yes.
I just wanted to throw out, in case anybody is here that's interested in trying to get more information, the Living Through Loss, Mrs. Jamie, she's the one who's in charge of that unit here. Hers are programs, lots of programs, but when we have developed a support group meeting and many moms come together every week, and because we're not finished yet with that block, we think it's a continuation, it's a continuing thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go in and out. You know, some people have been there for 5, 10 years, and some people are just, 2 weeks. So that there is a continuing thing above and beyond the living through loss. But living through loss is such a intricate part of how we got where we are, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's like special events like a Mother's Day brunch, and there's a holiday brunch where we also do community service. And then the retreats, there's annual retreats. So yeah, Jamie has a lot of great programming.
Can you mention about the meal thing too? Because I thought that was
Oh, yeah, the
such a
Mother's
cool
Day?
detail, the special meals.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the Mother's Day brunch where everyone brings in their child's favorite dish as a potluck. And so there is someone here that may or may not have brought in seaweed and some other things because their child liked to snack on seaweed. Cotton candy. We've had Swedish fish, lots of macaroni and cheese, lots of cakes. Actually, there's a story of someone who used to make a cake with their child and wasn't able to do it for years, and at our last one was finally able to make the peach pie. Yeah, and it was really special, and that was therapeutic for them.
Thank you.
Lori, did you want to speak?
Sure.
Yeah.
I wasn't planning on this, but
That's good, impromptu.
okay. Very anxious talking in front of people, but living through loss is amazing. It's I lost my oldest son. This year will be 7 years to addiction, and it's been a little over 2 years. I lost my youngest son to suicide. So one of the things I want to express with grief, and of course, like, did Sharon say it? Debbie said it about the being stigmatized. It's really, really hard. I feel like, people don't really want to speak your child's name, and it just becomes really hard. We want to hear people talk about our children, about memories that they have with our children. My boys had beautiful minds. And sometimes I think having that brilliant, beautiful mind can create chaos in your mind and the disease in your mind as well. They say things are a disease, but I really feel like it's a dis-ease in our minds what creates this chaos. And so therefore, addiction comes into play, suicide comes into play. And then as a grieving parent, I know I've really struggled with isolation. Jamie knows really well, all the ladies know that I've really struggled with that. And I've had to really make a concerted effort to say, okay, you're gonna go to this, you're gonna commit to this, you're gonna say yes to this. And every time I do, it's a beautiful thing. It's always welcomed with open arms. You're with people who understand what you're going through and love you regardless of your flaws, and love you for the beautiful person that you are. And so I really appreciate everything that this group has done for me. I've been absent a lot for the past couple years, but when I'm there, I want Jamie and all these beautiful ladies to know how much I love you and appreciate you. And you've really made a huge difference in my life through this never-ending grieving process. And doing that little quilt piece, I went there, I had no idea what I was gonna do. I was like, oh, I have no idea. And then I'm thinking, we're rooted in love. We're all bound and rooted by love. And life really is about simply love, just opening our hearts to being a loving, kind human being. So that's what I created, was a tree with roots. And that no matter what, I'm always rooted to my boys, and they're rooted to me, that we have that thread that will always connect us with just our eternal love for each other. So I really appreciate you.
Thanks for speaking. Does anyone else, Jamie, do you want to say anything, or does anyone else want to have a question?
Just so grateful to Whitney for being a part of our community. This is kind of, I'm just here in support tonight, but so grateful. Whitney's been invaluable in our community, and the quilt and the gift of the quilt has been such a healing thing for all of us. So thank you, Whitney.
Thanks. Yes.
First of all, I admire you so much, Whitney.
That was neat.
I love how you are overcoming stigma of certain types of loss. We have, like, a lot of us have our own stigma of, I'm not an artist and I am nervous to make something that's not perfect. And so I'm wondering how what do you find helpful for those of us who might feel like stuck or nervous to create? Like, what have you found helpful for us to overcome that?
Well, first I show them how badly I draw. I have little kids that make fun of my drawings because it is about the process. It's not about the finished product. I am an art therapist, but I do textiles. I really have not. I don't really draw so greatly, but it is therapeutic. But also there are different techniques that can be done for someone who is feeling that way. I mean, we did actually with Living Through Loss. One of the things we did was we had a grapevine quilt or a grapevine wreath, and we just ripped strips of fabric and tied them all around. And the choices of color that people picked were meaningful, and just that experience of ripping that fabric was very therapeutic. Sometimes too, I'll say, like, let's make some ugly stuff, and then you can make ugly stuff, and then you can cut out the part that maybe is okay or maybe you like, and then turn it into something else. So there's a lot of different things. Having someone use the end of like a paintbrush to kind of release control can be helpful. But yeah, just kind of education and talking about the process can be really helpful. Yeah. Yes.
Was it anything about your research that you found surprising, like about your results?
Mm-hmm. I'm sure there was.
I know how it is. Sometimes you do research and after you do it, it's like.
Yeah, and I'm also like, research is very scary to me. Like, I am an art therapist. So math, science, like all this. I did find that I like the organization part. There is like research that's like the themes was like organizing what people say. I was like, oh, I can do this kind of research. I like this. But I guess probably just not realizing the extent of the intensification with cutting in to the fabrics. Probably I wasn't expecting it to be quite like that. And actually, I don't know why I didn't think about this, but doing the art intervention last week with the therapists at the art therapy conference, I don't know why, but I really didn't expect so many tears and things like that. So I've kind of felt like, wow, why didn't, like, how did you not think that? So it kind of surprised me, and I guess thinking that I was, doing it more as a process, but everybody has grief. You saw my response art. I mean, we are people too, and we have feelings. So just thinking about how it is kind of affecting everyone in that. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
With the cutting in, like, did you ever have an instance where you had to like kind of redirect someone where like you're like, maybe you shouldn't use that item, like it was too much or maybe too valuable to them? Or?
I mean, there was a choice of what people brought in. I did kind of think the christening hat, I don't know, it made me a little bit kind of hesitant, but knowing that maybe she wasn't cutting in. But if she would have, that would have been where she was at. So a lot of times in art we say like you are drawn to the material that you need. So like I wouldn't say here you have to use watercolor for someone who clearly needs like a black and white charcoal pencil is like really into control. So the belief is that people will choose what they need, and so maybe that person would have needed that. I also will say this was not the first time I met these participants. I had been working with them for 2 years. I don't know that I would go into a group of people that I didn't know, that I didn't have a therapeutic relationship with, and ask them to start cutting their child's clothing. So I think that that played a big part. Anything else? Well, thanks everyone. This was great. I'm glad everyone came out.